Everything is about to explode. The oil wells, the secrets, the betrayals, and the power games. Landman Season 2, Episode 8 doesn't just raise the stakes, it completely destroys the board. One wrong move now could wipe Mtex off the map forever. And the scariest part is that the danger isn't coming from the outside anymore. It's already inside. Episode 8 proves that nothing is safe, no one can be trusted, and Galino's real endgame is finally starting to show. This episode doesn't slow down for a second, and by the time it ends, everything we thought we knew about control, loyalty, and survival is turned upside down. Section 1. As we enter Episode 8, the pressure on Mtex has reached an unbearable level. This is no longer just a business struggling to survive. This is a company standing at the edge of total collapse, with time running out and enemies circling from every direction. The oil wells are now the single most important factor deciding whether Mtex lives or dies. They don't have weeks to figure things out anymore. They don't even have days. Every failed attempt costs them more money, more credibility, and more control. And the terrifying truth is that even their best option feels like a trap. They need to open enough wells to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in an impossibly short time, and yet every expert opinion seems to push them toward fear instead of hope. That fear is not accidental, it is carefully planted. Charlie's role becomes even darker and more suspicious in this episode. On the surface, he still presents himself as a calm, logical professional, someone who only follows numbers and probabilities. But his repeated emphasis on failure, his obsession with the 10% chance, and his constant warnings feel less like caution and more like manipulation. Episode 8 makes it painfully clear that doubt is his strongest weapon. He doesn't need to sabotage the wells directly, he only needs to convince Mtex not to believe in them. And the most dangerous part is that his words are landing exactly where they hurt the most. Rebecca, a woman who built her entire identity around control, logic, and emotional distance, continues to trust him without question. This alone should terrify anyone watching. Rebecca's behavior in Episode 8 feels unsettling because it goes against everything we know about her. She listens, she softens, she hesitates. This is not the Rebecca who survives by questioning every detail and protecting herself from influence. The show quietly shows us how dangerous emotional blind spots can be, especially when power and money are involved. Charlie doesn't push hard, he doesn't rush. He lets Rebecca come to the conclusion he wants her to reach. And because Cammy and Tommy trust Rebecca so deeply, that doubt spreads like poison through the entire company. Episode 8 shows us that once doubt enters the room, it doesn't stay quiet, it starts making decisions. Meanwhile, Galino's presence looms larger than ever, even when he isn't speaking. This episode makes it clear that Galino doesn't need chaos, he needs desperation. Every failed well, every warning from Charlie, and every delay pushes Mtex closer to the exact position Galino wants them in. The more hopeless the situation feels, the more reasonable his future help will seem. Episode 8 carefully builds this tension by showing us how control doesn't always come through force. Sometimes it comes through patience. Galino is waiting for the moment when Mtex has no choice left. At the same time, cracks begin to show in the emotional foundation of the company. Trust between Tommy and Cammy has already been shaken, and Episode 8 forces them to confront just how visible that fracture has become. Galino's earlier warning about sharks suddenly feels chillingly accurate. When leadership hesitates, predators move in. And the episode subtly reminds us that the biggest danger isn't Galino himself, it's what he brings out in others. Fear, hesitation, and division are doing his work for him. Episode 8 feels insane because it doesn't rely on explosions or dramatic twists alone. Instead, it slowly tightens the grip around every character's throat. Every conversation feels loaded. Every decision feels like it could be the wrong one. And the worst part is that Mtex still believes they have time to fix things. The episode makes it painfully clear that time is exactly what they don't have. The clock is ticking, the wells are uncertain, trust is breaking down, and Galino is closer than ever to stepping in, not as an enemy, but as a savior. And that is what makes this episode truly terrifying.
Episode 8 pushes the psychological warfare to a whole new level, especially when it comes to the relationship between Tommy and Cammy. What once felt like an unbreakable partnership now feels fragile, strained, and dangerously exposed. This episode makes it clear that leadership under pressure doesn't just crack, it echoes. Every doubt Cammy has, Tommy feels. Every hesitation Tommy shows, Cammy notices. And Galino knows this better than anyone. He doesn't need to lie openly or make threats. He only needs to remind them subtly and repeatedly that they are not fully aligned anymore. That reminder alone is enough to shake the foundation of Mtex. Galino's manipulation in episode 8 becomes more refined and more aggressive at the same time. He positions himself as the only calm voice in a room full of panic, the only person willing to speak uncomfortable truths. He keeps repeating the idea that the oil wells are a gamble, not a solution. And when fear takes hold, logic starts to bend. The more Galino talks about risk, the more his future offer begins to feel like safety. This episode shows us how control often arrives wearing the mask of help. Galino doesn't force his way in. He waits until he is invited. The tension between Cammy and Galino finally explodes in this episode, and when it does, it feels shocking and deeply personal. Cammy confronting Galino and asking, "How dare you?" isn't just about business anymore. It's about boundaries being crossed. It's about Galino speaking of Monty and Mtex as if they are already his to judge, control, and reshape. For the first time, we see Cammy openly resist his influence, and that moment feels powerful, but also dangerous. Galino is not a man who reacts well to resistance. Episode 8 strongly suggests that this confrontation is the point of no return. At the same time, Tommy begins to sense that something isn't adding up. The certainty in Charlie's warnings starts to feel rehearsed. The repeated emphasis on failure begins to feel intentional. Episode 8 shows Tommy slowly shifting from passive acceptance to active questioning. He doesn't accuse anyone outright, but his instincts are clearly waking up. He starts to realize that if everyone is telling him the wells will fail, the real question is why. And more importantly, who benefits if they do? This shift in Tommy's mindset is one of the most important developments in the episode. What makes episode 8 feel completely insane is how it balances these quiet realizations with growing urgency. There are no easy answers, only bad options and worse consequences. If Mtex pushes forward and the wells fail, they collapse. If they pull back, they hand Galino exactly what he wants. Every path leads to loss unless someone breaks the pattern. And breaking that pattern means confronting uncomfortable truths about trust, about manipulation, and about how deep Galino's influence really goes. By the end of this section of the episode, it becomes clear that episode 8 is no longer about saving Mtex alone. It's about survival in a game where the rules are being rewritten in real time. Alliances are shifting, doubts are spreading, and the illusion of control is fading fast. The episode doesn't offer relief. It tightens the pressure even more, preparing us for consequences that can no longer be avoided. And the scariest part is that Galino hasn't even made his final move yet. As episode 8 moves forward, the focus shifts from quiet manipulation to open power plays, and this is where everything starts to feel truly unhinged. The pressure that has been building under the surface finally begins to spill over, and the consequences of every earlier decision start colliding at once. Mtex is no longer fighting just one battle. They are fighting time, fear, internal division, and a predator who knows exactly when to strike. This episode makes it painfully clear that once desperation sets in, even the strongest systems begin to turn against themselves. Charlie's influence becomes even more dangerous in this phase of the episode. His words don't change, but their effect does. The constant repetition of failure has now fully planted doubt across the leadership. What once sounded like professional caution now feels like a coordinated effort to freeze Mtex into inaction. Episode 8 subtly shows how hesitation can be just as destructive as a bad decision. Every meeting ends without clarity. Every plan ends with another warning. And while Mtex debates probabilities, Galino gains ground without lifting a finger. At the same time, Tommy's internal conflict reaches a breaking point. He is torn between trusting the people closest to him and trusting his own instincts. Episode 8 shows us how lonely leadership becomes when every option carries risk. Tommy begins to question not only Charlie's data, but the structure of influence around Mtex itself. Who is shaping the narrative? Who benefits from delay? And why does every road seem to lead back to Galino? These questions don't come with immediate answers, but the fact that Tommy is finally asking them changes everything. Cammie's role in this episode becomes more emotional and more volatile. She is no longer just reacting, she is feeling the weight of Monty's legacy pressing down on her. Every mention of debt, failure, or partnership with Galino feels like an attack on everything Monty built. Episode 8 shows Cammie struggling between pride and survival, between fighting back and giving in. Her anger toward Galino is raw, but beneath that anger is fear. Fear that she may be forced to make a deal that would erase Monty's vision forever. What makes this episode so intense is how it portrays control slipping away in slow motion. No dramatic collapse happens yet, but the warning signs are everywhere. Systems meant to protect Mtex are being used to trap it instead. Contracts, expert opinions, and financial pressure are all closing in at once. Galino doesn't need to threaten anyone anymore. The structure itself is doing his work for him. Episode 8 makes us realize that by the time Galino officially steps in, Mtex may already be his. As the episode moves toward its final moments, a chilling realization begins to form. The oil wells may not be the real battlefield anymore. The real fight is over belief. If Mtex stops believing in its own survival, the game is over. Episode 8 leaves us sitting in that uncomfortable space where hope still exists but is being crushed by carefully manufactured doubt. And with every passing moment, the line between choice and inevitability becomes harder to see. While the business side of Episode 8 feels darker than ever, the episode also takes time to remind us what is truly at stake on a human level. This is where Landman becomes even more powerful, because the emotional threads running through the story are just as tense as the financial ones. The pressure on Mtex is no longer contained within boardrooms and contracts. It is bleeding into personal relationships, testing loyalty, love, and identity. Episode 8 shows us that when everything starts collapsing, the personal cost becomes impossible to ignore. Tommy's relationship with Angela takes on deeper meaning in this episode. On the surface, their reconciliation may seem like a softer storyline, but Episode 8 quietly proves how necessary it is. Tommy is carrying the weight of impossible decisions, and Angela's presence becomes his only moment of emotional stability. She doesn't offer solutions or strategies, she offers belief. In a world where everyone is questioning outcomes, Angela believes in Tommy without conditions. That contrast is intentional. The episode shows us that survival isn't only about money or power, it's about having someone who reminds you why you're fighting in the first place. There are subtle hints throughout Episode 8 that this reconciliation is leading towards something bigger. Tommy isn't just repairing a relationship, he's rebuilding a foundation. With chaos surrounding him, the idea of committing again, of choosing stability in his personal life, feels like an act of resistance. The show suggests that as the season moves closer to its finale, Tommy may take a decisive step to fully reunite his family. And in a story driven by uncertainty, that possibility feels both hopeful and fragile. Meanwhile, Cooper and Ariana's storyline continues to serve as a quiet contrast to the storm surrounding Mtex. Their engagement represents a rare moment of certainty in a world built on risk. Episode 8 doesn't dramatize their relationship heavily, but that simplicity is exactly the point. While everything else feels unstable, their bond feels grounded. It reminds us of what normal life could look like if Galino's shadow wasn't hanging over everyone. But even here, there's an underlying tension. The episode subtly suggests that no one connected to Mtex is truly safe, and that happiness can quickly become a target. What makes Section 4 so impactful is how it reinforces the theme that Galino's influence extends far beyond contracts. His presence affects choices, emotions, and futures. Even when he isn't in the room, characters are reacting to the pressure he has created. Episode 8 makes us realize that Galino isn't just threatening a company, he's threatening the lives built around it. Every relationship shown here feels like something that could be damaged if his control becomes absolute. By weaving these emotional storylines into the larger conflict, Episode 8 deepens the sense of urgency. It's no longer just about whether Mtex survives as a business. It's about whether these people get to keep their families, their values, and their sense of self. The episode quietly asks a devastating question. What is the cost of survival, and who ends up paying it? And as the episode moves closer to its end, that question feels heavier than ever. As the story moves beyond episode 8 and stares directly toward the season finale, the atmosphere around Landman becomes suffocating. This is the phase where consequences stop being theoretical and start becoming permanent. Episode 8 doesn't resolve the chaos, it sharpens it. Every character now understands that the next move will define not just the company, but their own futures. The illusion that things can still be managed is gone. What remains is a brutal countdown. Galino's power in this moment feels almost absolute, not because he has taken over yet, but because everyone is already reacting as if he has. That is the genius of his strategy. He has turned himself into the inevitable outcome. Even resistance begins to feel pointless when the system itself favors him. Episode 8 leaves us with the chilling sense that Galino has engineered a situation where Mtex's survival depends on accepting his terms. And when control reaches that level, it no longer needs force. It only needs time. At the same time, the oil wells return as a symbol of both hope and madness. Betting everything on them now feels reckless, but also necessary. Episode 8 makes us question whether taking that risk is bravery or denial. If the wells succeed, Mtex defies the narrative forced upon it. If they fail, Galino's takeover becomes justified in the eyes of everyone involved. This binary outcome is what makes the situation so terrifying. There is no backup plan left, no safety net, just one final gamble against a man who never gambles. Emotionally, the characters are exhausted, and that exhaustion is dangerous. Decision-making under this level of stress leads to mistakes, compromises, and moments of weakness. Episode 8 shows us how close everyone is to breaking. Loyalty is strained, trust feels conditional, and even love starts to feel vulnerable under the weight of what's coming. The episode prepares us for the idea that the finale won't just test intelligence or strategy, it will test character. By the end of this stretch, the message is unmistakable. The story is heading toward a collision. Either Mtex reclaims control through one bold, defiant move, or Galino steps in and reshapes everything in his image. There is no version of the ending where everyone walks away unchanged. Episode 8 serves as the final warning before impact, reminding us that insanity isn't loud chaos. It's the quiet moment when you realize there's no turning back. As episode 8 reaches its final stretch, everything that has been building throughout the season begins to feel unavoidable. The tension is no longer rising, it is locked in place, pressing down on every character at once. This is the point where Landman Season 2 Episode 8 truly earns the word insane, because the episode doesn't offer comfort, resolution, or relief. Instead, it forces us to sit with the consequences that are coming, whether anyone is ready for them or not. Galino's next move becomes painfully clear, even if he hasn't officially made it yet. He is preparing to step in not as a villain, but as a solution. Episode 8 makes us understand how dangerous this moment is. When a company is desperate enough, even the worst deal can look reasonable. Galino knows this, and he is waiting for Mtex to reach the point where pride collapses into survival instinct. His patience is terrifying because it proves how confident he is that the outcome will favor him. He isn't chasing control anymore, he's allowing it to come to him. At the same time, Tommy stands at a crossroads. This episode quietly sets him up for a defining choice that will shape the season finale. He can follow the path of fear, accept the narrative that failure is inevitable, and allow Galino to take control. Or he can challenge everything he's been told, question every expert, and take one final massive risk on the oil wells. Episode 8 doesn't tell us which path he will choose, but it makes one thing clear: there will be no middle ground. Whatever decision Tommy makes next will either save Mtex or destroy it completely. Cammie's arc in this episode ends on a note of painful clarity. She understands now that Galino's interest was never about partnership, it was about ownership. Her anger, her resistance, and her fear all collide into one realization. If Mtex falls, Monty's legacy falls with it. Episode 8 positions Cammie as someone who may soon be forced to choose between protecting the past and securing the future. And sometimes, those two things cannot coexist. What makes the ending of Episode 8 so powerful is its restraint. There is no dramatic victory, no shocking collapse, only the feeling that the storm is directly overhead. Every character is aware that the next move will be irreversible. The episode leaves us in a state of tension that feels almost unbearable, reminding us that the season finale will not be kind. Something will be lost. The only question is what? By the time the episode ends, one truth is impossible to ignore. Lan